بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. Riyadh, I'll start from the left now. It's your right first, man. Tell me some of the virtues of etiquette for managers. You gain the love of Allah and the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam.
It helps populate the area.
Does decrease last one now.
It leads to Jannah.
Means to Jannah.
It is a means of showing the person's iman level.
It's a sign of a person's iman. And the more that person has, the more complete he is in his iman. There's 8 years. You mentioned about 4? 4 or 5? Looking at them up. You mentioned that.
I mentioned 5.
You mentioned 5?
Yeah,
So 3 left. You said entering the Jannah. I even sent them once as well. No one's buying excuse. Go on, you can look, you can have a look.
Good manners is the indication for the completeness of the iman, means of increasing the iman. Good manners is from the greatest of actions.
It's from the greatest of actions, okay. Right.
It's a means of reward. Multiplied.
What being multiplied?
So the heaviest of things on the scale.
Heaviest things on the scale, right. So there are 8 points. Let's put it in the wrong. Okay. Is this better? It's the same. Okay. What was the summary of the introduction of the author? About knowledge that you attain is dependent upon how much you venerate that knowledge. How do you venerate knowledge? By having sincere intention. By learning the etiquettes of student of knowledge about learning. From those is this book. Right? Don't limit it to this book. But from the etiquettes are what's mentioned in this book. And from the things mentioned in this book is what you mentioned, sincerity. That was one of the points. Right. The first principle that the Shaykh mentioned was regarding cleaning the vessel. Cleaning the vessel from what? From doubts and desires. And that includes the greatest one being shirk and bid'ah and then sins. I'm asking. Acting upon knowledge. Acting upon knowledge. Good. Give me a delete for that principle. Give me a proof for that principle. Not for sincerity. Now, give me a delete, a proof from the Quran and Sunnah. Ayah or Hadith. Next to you. At the back. Very famous hadith, easy.
There's nothing more dangerous than the first. There's two wolves.
Because that was one hadith we mentioned at the end regarding what was it about?
I forgot the wording of it.
Two what?
Two wolves.
Yeah, two wolves. Mazibani Jaya. The two wolves being sent out to flocks aren't as dangerous as somebody who is sincerely seeking knowledge. But the main one in the book is إنما الأعمال بالنيات. Very famous hadith, easy hadith. Actions are by the intentions. Right. The third principle that we took was Naeem, what was the third principle?
Gather all the energy for knowledge.
Gather all the energy upon knowledge. Muhib, how do we do that? Three things. We want having tunnel vision, focusing on that which is beneficial. Then asking Allah's assistance and don't despair and turn away from that path. Tanzil, what's the proof? I heard you before class, that's what I'm asking. احرص
على من ينفعك واستعين بالله ولا تعجز.
احرص على ما ينفعك, which means strive على ما ينفع upon that which is beneficial. واستعين بالله, seek assistance in Allah. ولا تعجز, and do not despair, do not deter from the path. Okay, alhamdulillah. They were the main points. We then started chapter number 4. So chapter number 4, we took the first page. The first page, or the title of principle number 4, is exerting your zeal to the knowledge of the Quran and Sunnah. Meaning, we've got all of this energy now and motivation to learn. And one of the points that we said is that we have to have tunnel vision and focus on that which is beneficial. So this fourth principle is now mentioning what is beneficial, what is the thing that we should be focusing on. All that zeal that we have, all that motivation that we had, where should we be directing it to? And we mentioned you direct it to the knowledge of the Quran and the Sunnah. And the first page we took, so quickly revise over it. We said knowledge of the Quran and Sunnah is of two types. The Shaykh mentions three, but one of them isn't beneficial, or one of them is something which the Shaykh said if you know or don't know, it doesn't really have an effect on you. So we're left with two. What are these two types of knowledges which come under the Quran and Sunnah? Objectives and tools, very good. The first, we said Islamic sciences are split into two. Ulum al-ghaya, those sciences which are the objectives. The objective we try and learn, aqidah, fiqh, right, and so on. And then we have ulum al-ala, those sciences which are the tools, i.e. those tools which help you understand the objectives, like the Arabic language, that helps you understand aqidah and fiqh, like usul al-fiqh, like mustalah hadith. Mustalah hadith tells you what makes hadith authentic, what makes it weak, and so on. So we use that to understand hadith, because that which is authentic, we act upon that hadith, and that which isn't, we do not act upon it. Now. And then we took the first page, and now we're going to carry on from page 27, from the middle of the page, where the author says, this used to be the knowledge of the Salaf. So, in the beginning, part of this principle, the author, he says that we should divert all our zeal and motivation to the knowledge of the Quran and Sunnah. And we've explained what does it mean by knowledge of the Quran and Sunnah. We said there are two types. Both of them come into it. Because the ulum al-ala, the tools, they would come under the knowledge of the Quran and Sunnah. Why? Because it aids you in understanding the Quran and Sunnah. So after establishing the principle or the foundation, which is focusing upon the Quran and Sunnah, as the Prophet ﷺ, he said, I have left for you two things, you will never go astray as long as you cling on to both of them, Kitabullah وسنتي, the book of Allah and my sunnah. So then the author, he says, this used to be the knowledge of the Salaf, i.e. sticking to the Quran and the Sunnah. May Allah have mercy upon them. Then speech became plentiful in those that came after them in that which does not benefit. So he says here that we look at the Salaf from the Sahaba, the companions of Allah, and then the Tabi'een, and then the students of the Tabi'een, and so on, then their knowledge sufficed with what? Just the knowledge of the Quran and Sunnah. That was their knowledge. And if I was to ask you now, who is more knowledgeable, the later scholars or the previous scholars from the Salaf, we would all say the Salaf, right? Why is that? Because their knowledge came from the light of the Quran and Sunnah. So it's not enough for a person just to be intelligent, but he has to also purify his knowledge with the knowledge of the Quran and Sunnah. And depending on how much his knowledge is tainted with things other than the Quran and Sunnah, or that which opposes the Quran and Sunnah, the less a person will attain beneficial knowledge. Lines of poetry, the poet, he says, هتف الذكاء وقال لست بنافع إلا بتوفيق من الوهاب. That intelligence is calling. I said that I am not beneficial except if it is accompanied with guidance from Al-Wahhab, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, Shaykh al Usaymi says, الذكاء بلا زكاة لا ينفع بالعلم. Just having zaka, which means intelligence, without zaka, purification. Obviously in Arabic it sounds a lot more poetic. الذكاء بلا زكاة. So having intelligence without purification will not benefit a person in knowledge. And what do we mean by purification here? We mean purification of knowledge, i.e. authentic knowledge which stems from the Quran and Sunnah. Shaykh al Usaymi ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, he's got a book titled Al-Hamawiyya, which is a great book in Aqidah, studied after Wasitiyah and Tadmuriyah and so on. Towards the end of the book, he speaks about some of the mutakallimin, some of the people of innovation that turned away from the Quran and Sunnah and focused more on ilm al-kalam, rhetoric, philosophy, and things like that. And that crept into their Islamic beliefs, hence why they have a lot of beliefs which go against the Quran and Sunnah. Because of the philosophy and the rhetoric and all of that, they came up with their own conclusions, not those conclusions that the Sahaba radiallahu anhum had. So he describes these people and he says, toward the end of his book, he says, "Utu zaka'an wa lam yu'tu zaka'an." They were given zakah, intelligence. And some of them were intelligent. Read their book, some of the things they talk about are quite difficult to understand. Utu zaka'an, they were given intelligence. Wa lam yu'tu zaka'an. But they were not given purification. Wa u'tu uluman wa lam yu'tu fuhuman. And they were given ilm, knowledge, but they weren't given understanding. I.e. they had the knowledge, but they didn't have the correct understanding with it. وَجَعَلَ اللَّهُ لَهُمْ سَمْعًا وَأَبْصَارًا وَأَفْئِدَةً. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made for them hearing, seeing, and hearts. And that's an ayah. وَجَعَلَ اللَّهُ لَهُمْ سَمْعًا, that's taken from the Quran. فَمَا أَغْنَى عَنْهُمْ سَمْعُهُمْ وَلَا أَبْصَارُهُمْ وَلَا أَفْئِدَتُهُمْ مِنْ شَيْءٍ. That's also from the Quran. And then he says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them seeing, hearing, and hearts, but the seeing, hearing, and hearts do not benefit them in any way, shape, or form. So what does that show us? That shows us that just having intelligence isn't enough. Just being able to talk and to come to your own conclusions isn't enough. But it has to be based upon the Quran and the Sunnah of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then the author continues and he says, so knowledge with the Salaf, so after mentioning how the Salaf stuck with the Quran and Sunnah, and how those who came later, they turned away from the Quran and Sunnah, but they started to speak more. He says, so knowledge with the knowledge with the Salaf is more, and additional speech in the later generations is more. So he says here, the Salaf spoke less, but the knowledge was more. They spoke less, but the knowledge was more, and the later scholars speak more, but their knowledge is less. Hamad ibn Zayd, he said, I asked Ayyub al-Sikhtiyani, is knowledge today more in those that came before? He said, Al-kalamu al-yawma akthar, wal-ilmu fima taqaddama akthar. speech today is more, and knowledge of those that preceded is more. Why is that? It's because they stuck with the origin of knowledge, which is the Quran and Sunnah. And likewise, when they wanted to benefit the people, they wanted to benefit them with the Quran and Sunnah. Hence, they did not cover up the Quran and Sunnah with speech from themselves. Rather, they sufficed with the Quran and Sunnah and gave just that to the people. And due to that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed them in the little that they spoke. Whereas those who spoke more from the scholars that came later on, they had less barakah in their speech. And then also the foundation of this, the best example of this is the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was given Jawami' al-Kalim. What's Jawami' al-Kalim? Comprehensive speech. But the person spoke very little, but the meaning is vast. For example, the hadith, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. Imam Shafi'i, what did he say? ثُلُثُ الْعِلْمِ, it is a third of knowledge, and it enters into 70 chapters of fiqh. إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. Ibn Abil Izz, rahimahullah, he says, فلذلك كان المتأخرين كثيرا قليل البركة بخلاف كلام المتقدمين فإنه قليل كثير البركة. And this is why the speech of the later scholars is a lot, but it has a little bit of barakah. Unlike the scholars of unlike the speech of the earlier scholars, فإنه قليل. Very, their speech was little, كثير البركة, but it had a lot of barakah. And Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah also indicated towards this meaning. There's a statement here of Hamdun al-Qassar, which I think is a very, very powerful statement. Hamdun al-Qassar rahimahullah, he was asked, ما بال كلام السلف أنفع من كلامنا. Why is it that the speech of the Salaf is more beneficial than our speech? Why is it that the speech of the Salaf is more beneficial than our speech? And he said, لأنهم تكلموا لعز الإسلام. Because they spoke for the honor of Islam. وَنَجَاةِ النُّفُوسِ, and for salvation of the souls. وَرِضَى الرَّحْمَنِ, and for the pleasure of Ar-Rahman, the most merciful, i.e. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَنَحْنُ نَتَكَلَّمُ, and we speak لِعِزَّةِ النَّفْسِ, for the honor of ourselves. وَطَلَبِ الدُّنْيَا, and seeking this dunya. وَرِضَى الْخَلْقِ, and for the pleasure of the creation. That's narrated by Al-Bayhaqi in Shu'ab al-Iman, and Abu Nu'aym al-Asbahani in Hilyat al-Awliya. In his book, Hilyat al-Awliya. So, Alhamdulillah Qasar, I'll repeat his answer. He says, لأنهم, because they spoke لعز الإسلام, for the honor of Islam, ونجاة النفوس, and salvation of the souls, ورضا الرحمن, and the pleasure of Ar-Rahman, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. ونحن نتكلم, and we speak لعزة النفس, for the honor of ourselves, وطلب الدنيا, and to seek this world, ورضا الخلق, and the pleasure of the creation. That's why, if you go to universities, for example, right, sometimes you find the professors speaking for hours. But the actual point that he's making is what it can be summarized in 5 minutes. Sometimes, I one teacher, not in Medina, in uni when I was here in my masters, he spoke for such a long time, literally there's no point in making, he just spoke. It sounded good, when you actually think about it, okay, what did he actually say? There's no point, he was just talking about different things. That's not ilm. Just because you can talk, that's not knowledge. So if you look at the Prophet ﷺ, look at the Sahaba, look at the Tabi'in, they spoke very little. But their statements until now, how many benefits can we take from it? How is it that, for example, Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah, when he stayed over at Imam Ahmad's house, he didn't sleep the night. And it's a long story, but one of the things that took place was that Imam Ahmad told his daughter to observe Imam Shafi'i, to great Imam, benefit from him. So she was shocked because she had put a bucket of water out so that he can use that water for Qiyam al-Layl. But Fajr time came and the water wasn't touched. So she was shocked. So Imam Ahmad later asked Imam Shafi'i, he said that I was about to sleep, but I was thinking of a hadith of Prophet ﷺ, يا عمير ما فعل النغير. That's it. يا عمير ما فعل النغير. 5 words. And I extracted, I think he said 70 benefits throughout the whole night. And I was just busy thinking about the hadith, so I didn't sleep. So I ended up praying Fajr with the same wudu. Or something along those lines. Subhanallah. Ya Umair ma fa'ala an-nughayr. Okay, which means it was a young companion. His name was Umair. He had a bird that passed away, right? And he was upset. So then the Prophet ﷺ, he uh, he said to him, or Umair, what happened to the bird? Basically, that's basically the hadith, right? And from that hadith, Imam Shafi'i took so many benefits from them. So likewise, don't be from those who just want long, lectures. Or there are some people that they want a lecture, they want that lecture to be okay. It has to be at least an hour long, 1.5 hour long. And if that same lecture was only 20 minutes, they're like, nah, it's not that beneficial. But who said the duration of the lecture shows what's more beneficial or not, right? Sometimes what I'll have is that people come ask me a question, and I'll give 1 word, 2 word answers. I want to study this. What should I study? I'll give them 1 book name or 2 books name. That's it. One person replied to me, oh, is that it? I said, what do you mean? He said, oh, I thought it was going to be a long answer. I said to him, once you finish these 2 books, come back to me, then I'll give you more. Until now, it's not missing. So, and that's the reality. People want, oh, you want to study this, this book, right? How many books have you actually studied? Oh, 0. Which book have you studied? Beginning to end? 0. Right? So don't be from those who gets deceived by shaitan, by a person who just speaks a lot. If you look at Ibn Baz rahimahullah, he would finish books in very short periods of time. His explanations are very short. I remember his book Shurut al-Salah. He explained. Shurut al-Salah is a small book anyway. I explained it, and it took me 4 hours to explain, right? Guess how long it took Ibn Baz? It took him 5 days between Azan and Iqam. 5 days between Azan and Iqam. What's that? An hour. Finish all the book. Look at his explanations of Kitab al-Tawheed, of Wasitiyah, of all these. The book's very, very short. He would finish them very quickly. Why? Because he wanted to benefit the people. Right? Look at his fatwa. Somebody asks him a question, gives the answer, gives the dalil, and that's it. That's all the person needs to know. Is it allowed? Is it not allowed? Right? It's allowed. This is the proof. That's it. Move on. There's one sheikh, I heard the story of one sheikh who, in Hajj, he was asked a question by some Egyptian regarding Rami al-Jimar, throwing the stones at the Jimar, the 3 of them. And the sheikh, he went into the detail. He said the ulama have differed upon this issue upon 3 different opinions. The first opinion is X, Y, and Z, and the second opinion is this, and the third opinion is this. As for the first opinion, this person said this, and as for the second position, this person took this position, and as for the third, this other scholar took this position. So as for the first opinion, their proof is A, B, and C. As for the second is A, B, and C. As for the third, X, Y, and Z. And the answer we can give to the first proof is that this hadith. Halfway through, this Egyptian stopped him. He said it in this Egyptian. When the story got relayed to me, it got relayed in the Egyptian accent, which sounds a little more funny, but I can't do the Egyptian accent, so I'm not going to try. But they just basically said, Sheikh, do I throw or do I not throw? Just tell me. Like, you tell me all these details. I just need to know. Do I throw or not throw? Yes, no. Right? So in this case, what's more beneficial? Tell the guy just to answer with one delete or go into the whole issue? Yeah. So, is that which is more beneficial is not defined by the one who speaks more. So if you look at the Salaf, their speech was less, but the barakah and the benefit was a lot more. Now move on to principle number 5. Principle number 5 says, treading the known path that leads to it, i.e., that leads to knowledge. What's it? Knowledge. This principle is telling us, as if you read the first line, it says, everything that is sought has a path that leads to it. Anything that you want to attain in life, or anywhere you want to go, there's always a path to it. This chapter is telling you that you have to take the correct path. Right? You want to go to Makkah, right? You go in, let's say, this direction. You don't go in the opposite direction, otherwise it's not going to get there. Right? So there's a path that you have to take. So this principle is telling us that make sure you tread upon the correct path when it comes to seeking knowledge. So the author he says, everything that is sought has a path that leads to it. So whoever treads the known path to his goal will reach it, and whoever turns away from it does not attain his goal. Indeed, knowledge has a path. Whoever misses it becomes lost and does not attain his target. And perhaps he may gain a small amount of benefit whilst overworking himself. So, in summary, the one who takes the correct path of seeking knowledge will attain that knowledge. As for the one who takes an incorrect path, then what will happen? Either he will not attain that knowledge. Firstly, either he will not attain that knowledge. Or secondly, he will attain a little bit of knowledge, but with a lot of effort being exerted. Just tiring himself out for no need. Right? I'll give you an example, okay? Let's say, you see at the back of the room there's a window, right? Let's say a book of mine was on there. So I said, Naeem, please, can you get that book for me? If Naeem got up, went, got the book, gave it back to me, right? That's a correct path. If Naeem got up, decided to go into the library, went down the stairs, went past the old area, came back up the stairs that way, and then got the book, and then decided to go back the same way, right? And he's giving it back to me. Okay, in this scenario, he might have reached the destination by giving me the book, but he did so much more which was unnecessary. Just tired himself out, and now he's tired walking up the stairs, out of breath, right? So that's the same thing in seeking knowledge, right? Or worse, he goes down those stairs, he goes to the library, goes down, gets lost, and he ends up leaving the masjid. Right? And he doesn't reach his goal, and he's just there confused. Okay? So we have to take the correct path in seeking knowledge. The author, he says, this path has been mentioned in a comprehensive statement by Muhammad Murtada al-Zabidi, the author of Taj al-Urus, in his poem that he called Alfiyat al-Sanad. He says, فما حوى الغاية في ألف سنة شخص فخذ من كل فن أحسنه بحفظ متن جامح للراجح تأخذه على مفيد ناصح. Which translates to you the translation here. And no one has reached 1,000 years. So take from every field the best of it, by memorizing a comprehensive text with the most correct opinion, and you taking it with a beneficial, sincere teacher. So the path of knowledge and its way is built upon two affairs. Whoever takes up both becomes a glorifier to knowledge because he seeks it from where it is possible to attain it. So these lines of poetry is saying, فَمَا حَوَى الْغَايَةَ فِي أَلْفِ سَنَةٍ. None of us are going to live 1,000 years. Right. So we don't have 1,000 years to waste to try to attain knowledge. We have to try to attain as much knowledge as we can in a short period of time. And how can that be done? In this line of poetry, he mentions two things. The Shaykh, he explains these lines of poetry and he says, what are these two things? So on the correct path of seeking knowledge, what are the two things that we need? He says the first thing, is memorizing a comprehensive text with the most correct opinion. The first thing that person needs to do is memorize mutun, memorize scholarly texts. Before scholarly text, the first thing is the Quran. The first thing is the Quran. The Quran is given precedence over memorizing anything else. And I've got a whole lecture on this on my channel titled, I think it's titled, لِمَاذَا نَبْدَأُ بِالْقُرْآنِ. Why do we start with the Quran? So that shows the importance of starting with the Quran when it comes to seeking knowledge. However, after that, or if a person is not able to memorize the whole Quran, or he wants to do the Quran and something else at the same time, and that obviously would go back to the ability of the person. Generally, if a person asks me, should I memorize mutun or Quran, I'd say, if you are serious about the Quran, focus just on the Quran. Right? And then after the Quran, you can do both. However, you can focus on the mutun. However, if you're not serious about the Quran, meaning your lesson is just, let's say, you have 1 hour Quran lesson a week. For most people, they're not going to memorize the Quran just for doing 1 hour a week. It requires 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hours every single day. Okay? So for that person, I would say, okay, do both. Do the Quran and at the same time memorize the mutun that you're studying with your teacher. And that's what Imam Ahmed, an old man came to him and asked him, should I memorize or should I focus more on understanding? Because he was old in age, Imam Ahmed realized that he won't be able to memorize. So he said to him, you focus more on understanding. So it does go back to everyone's individual situation, but the answer I just gave was a general one. And again, similar to that, if somebody's exceptional, then maybe he can memorize the Quran with mutun if he's able to do so. But that would be an exception to the rule, and that would be rare. So the first thing that we need to do is memorize scholarly texts, okay, such as Usul al-Thalatha. For example, in Aqidah with Usul al-Thalatha, Aqwal al-Arba', the 3 questions of the grave, the 4 principles of shirk, Nawaqid al-Islam, the 10 nullifiers of Islam, Kitab al-Tawheed, the book of Tawheed, Al-Aqidah al-Wasitiyah, then maybe Al-Aqidah al-Tahawiyah, books like this, right? And likewise, for example, in Hadith, Mustalah al-Hadith, you would do Manzum al-Biquniyah, maybe Nukht al-Fikr, اختصار علوم الحديث by Ibn Kathir, and then Ibn al-Salah, his Muqaddimah. Probably want to memorize the last 2. Actually, you'll memorize, Alfiyat al-Iraqi or Alfiyat al-Siyuti, the Asas and Poetry by Iraqi or al-Siyuti. When it comes to Arabic grammar, you'll do Al-Ajurumiyah, and then you'll move on to either Qatr al-Nada or Alfiyat al-Malik. Or if you want to do before that, you can do Mutammimat al-Ajurumiyah. In Hadith, you start off with 40 Hadith Imam Nawawi. Then you move on to Umdat al-Ahkam, then Bulugh al-Maram, and then Muntaqa al-Akhbar if you're able to do, and so on. So you see how if you memorize these texts, why? Is because all of these texts will capture all that knowledge and keep it there for you. For example, right? إنما الأعمال بالنيات. You've answered this. Everyone knows this hadith, right? You memorize this hadith. Anyone asks you a question, this hadith can be applied, like Imam Shafi'i said, in 70 different chapters of fiqh. So 70 different questions can come to you. All you need to know is إنما الأعمال بالنيات, and you give the answer to 70 different questions. Why? Because you memorized that hadith and you understood it correctly, so you can give a correct answer. Right? Likewise, in Arabic grammar. Okay? For example, somebody will say to me, why is this word mansub? Why does it have a fatha? All I have to do is memorize Ibn Ajrum says Ajrumiyah. والنواصب 10 أن ولن وإذن وكيف ولم وكيف ولم جحد. He mentions all the things that make a fi'l have become mansub. In simple words, have a fatha. Right? I know all them. Right? So because I've memorized it, literally 2 lines, anywhere that comes in Arabic or any question somebody asks me, right, the answer's there. Right? So that's the benefit of memorizing. You always go back to what you memorize. Obviously, after you memorize, you study them as well to make sure that you correctly understood them. What are the books that a person should focus on when it comes to? I'm going to ask 2 questions actually. Firstly, what are the books that a person should study, and then after that, which are the books that a person should memorize? Okay, because the question I wanted to ask, which is appropriate to ask here, is which book should a person memorize? However, I want to also answer the question, which book should a person study, because memorization will have the same answer plus a few extra points. Okay, so the first question is, what are the books that a person should study? There are 4 characteristics that a person should look for when he wants to study a certain book. 4 characteristics of a book that you should look at to decide which book he wants to study. The first is that the ulama, the scholars, have praised that book. The scholars have praised that book. So if you see that a youngster comes up to you and he says, oh, this is an amazing book, there's so many benefits in there, it's got this and it's got poetry and it's got ayat, and he says all of that. And then you can't find one scholar who has praised that book, then what do? It's best of leaving that book and going to something else. Let's say you got another book that every scholar you come across is praising that book. Which of the 2 books you choose? The one which your ulama, the scholars are praising. Why? Because they know better than you what's inside that book. There's so many people, even now, I don't know if you're students in Medina, even till now, they're doing the same thing. They're doing a lot less though. I remember when they first started, every week I'd get a message. Oh, I started with this sheikh, oh, he's amazing, he's the best thing ever. Then he finds a new one, oh, this sheikh's really good, right? And even till now, I actually get a message from that same person saying that, oh, this sheikh's good, right? He's just jumping at anything new, he's like, oh, it's amazing. He doesn't really understand what makes a teacher good, what makes him bad, and so on. Likewise with books. So the first thing you should be looking at is the praise of the ulama. The second is the soundness of the author's aqidah. The soundness of the author's aqidah. For verily, if the author does not have a sound aqidah, then that can have an effect on the book that he has authored, as we will explain in the next principle how the different sciences are all intertwined and linked. And if his aqidah is not sound, then it can have an effect on what he has written in that book. or even if it doesn't have an effect on particularly what is mentioned in that book, it can still have an effect on you. You may think, oh, this scholar is fine, and you start reading his other books. Even though if one book might be correct, you'll be listening to other things that he has said or written, and that it can also have an effect on you. And then there's another disadvantage or con that will take place is that it would seem like the people in innovation have more followers. More people are buying that book, they're benefiting from the money, and then that also gets more publicity as well, and so on. So there's many harms for that. So a person should always stick to whose aqidah is sound. The third is that the book is makhdum. Makhdum, can't think of a translation for it. Maybe you guys can tell me a word for it. Makhdum from the word khidmah. A book is makhdum, i.e. the book is worked upon. Meaning, many scholars have explained that book. Many scholars have written explanations of that book. It's taught in many different places. If you want to look for a lesson on that book, you can easily find it. There's summaries of the book. There's videos on that book. That's what it means by makhdum. What's the translation for makhdum?
Widespread.
No, not necessarily widespread, but the work on it is widespread, you could say. Like a khadim is like a servant, right? Just takes care of you all the time. So this book is well taken care of, basically. So give me a good translation. Well established. Could be, but well established doesn't really give you, it means the book itself is established. Doesn't necessarily mean it's worked upon, but it could be. Okay. I'll give you guys that homework inshallah. Come back next week, make sure you tell me a good translation for the makhdum. And the third is that it's beneficial. It's beneficial. Meaning a book might be a nice book or it's good, but it's not beneficial. Why? Well, why are you wasting your time with it? Alright? So you might find a book, oh, this book looks really good. Okay, is it beneficial? Is it benefiting you? Is it giving you what you need, not what you want? Is it teaching you in the correct way so that you actually benefit? Or is it not? Right? So you have to look at the benefit of the book also. So for example, if you had two books to buy, Arabic grammar and how to pray salah, and you do not know how to pray salah, which book do you go for? How to pray salah, because that's more beneficial for you right now than the Arabic. Even though the Arabic is very important, but for you what's more beneficial? The salah. Yeah. So this is in regards to which book should a person study. On top of that, now, which book should a person memorize? These exact same points. Okay? And that's, and what we could also add is that when the author says here, Matn Rajih, the most strongest opinion, i.e., that text which is more precise in its wording and meanings. Right? And how do we know that? By the praises of the ulama. Okay? By the praises of the ulama. So you don't want to end up memorizing a book where you memorize definitions, but you find that later those definitions aren't precise. You memorize the fifth book, but you realize that every single opinion in there is the weaker opinion. You don't want to be doing something like that. So how do you know which book is rajih? By looking at what the ulama said. So it would come under, the first one that you mentioned, the praise of the ulama. So the ulama, for example, in Aqidah said, Usul al-Thalatha, Qada Arba'a, Kitab al-Tawheed, and so on. Also another point, which is important to mention as well, is to make sure that you are memorizing from the correct edition of the book. Meaning, especially in Arabic, the wording is very precise, right? So you don't want to be memorizing from a book that has a lot of mistakes in there. Whether the author or the publisher has made mistakes, or whether there's typos or anything like that. You want to make sure that everything you're memorizing is correct. So you don't want to memorize from a book where the book says, the Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالَ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. No, the Prophet said, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. So you don't be memorizing incorrectly. So that is in regards to the books that we need to memorize. So which books do we memorize? The same answer as the books that we study, plus a couple of extra points. So, go back to what the author he says. And these mutun are very important. For example, look at Ibn Baz rahimahullah. Ibn Baz, and he was a judge in Dillam, which is in Riyadh. He taught Usul al-Thalatha more than 100 times. He taught Usul al-Thalatha, very, very short book, over 100 times. Also, throughout his life, as Shaykh Qasim mentioned, I think 4 days a week he would be revising Bulugh al-Maram. Bulugh al-Maram in hadith. Right? Just revise that. That's what he would do. And if you look at the fatwa, the answers that he's giving, right? Most of the proofs from there are from the book Bulugh al-Maram. Even the way Ibn Hajar in Bulugh al-Maram mentions the references, Ibn Baz mentions it in the same way. Ibn Hajar has his own way of referencing. So he says, أخرجه الخمسة, the 5 narrative. Who are the 5? He's referring to 5 certain people. أخرجه الأربعة. Who are the 4? Certain number of people. Who are the 3? And so on, right? I think the 3 are Bukhari, Muslim, Ahmad. The 4 are the 4 Sunan. Something like that, right? So even Ibn Baz would give the exact same way of referencing. So, and subhanAllah, the current fatwa Ibn Baz has, sometimes if I found a search, a 50 issue, if you type in literally the first link that will come up a lot of times in Ibn Baz. He's got answers to so many questions. Right? All that knowledge, where's all those answers coming from? He memorized a book, a matan, as you mentioned here. And then the answer just coming, because he mentioned a book which has about 1,200, 1,300 hadith, answers come from that, come from that. So that shows the importance of memorizing these books. So he says the first affair is memorizing a comprehensive text with the most correct opinion. So it is a must to memorize. And whoever thinks they will attain knowledge without memorizing, then he is seeking the impossible. You have to have both, memorizing and understanding. Okay? So just because we're talking about memorization, don't think we are downplaying understanding. No, both have to be there. And if somebody had to give preference to one, if you had to, then maybe you would give preference to the understanding slightly, right? Because if you just memorize and don't understand anything, then there's no real point to it. However, this is highlighting memorization. Why? Because there's a lot of people that don't memorize anything at all. Why? Because it's easier not to memorize. Memorization requires dedication and consistency. The author, he says, the text that is memorized is the one that is comprehensive and inclusive to the most correct opinion, meaning the one that is widely entrusted by the people of knowledge. That's what we mentioned. The meaning of the word rajih. Meaning of the word rajih. Page 30 now, the second one now.
Going back to the point, who's least blameworthy? The person who memorizes but doesn't understand, or the person who understands but doesn't memorize?
Good question. Who is least blameworthy? A person who memorizes but doesn't understand, or a person who understands but doesn't memorize? Okay? This depends on the person. Okay? What is more important is that a person understands and he acts upon it. However, if he's not memorizing, he's going to forget what he understood. That's the issue. That's why both have to be there. Right? But it depends on the person. So if there's a person who's young in age, young child, you make them memorize more. Why? Because he's at the age where he can memorize more, he can take in like a sponge. We're going to take, maybe we'll get there today, regarding memorization in young age. Okay? Whereas somebody older, right, for him, it might be more important for him to understand why, because it's obligatory for him to act right now. So instead of taking time out to memorize, he needs to know how to pray salah. So it would be more important for him to learn how to pray salah correctly, for example. So it's a very general question, because also another factor will come into it, understanding what and memorizing what. So understanding the obligations upon you, like how to pray salah, how to give zakat, obviously you have to understand them, because you have to pray. Like today, 5 times a day you have to pray. So you have to know that as soon as possible. Okay? So the question is very general, but inshallah that clarifies it a bit more. But the best is not to pick one, it's to do both. That you memorize the main books of ulama tell you to, and then you understand them and act upon them. There's a statement of Ibn Uthaymin rahimahullah. It is in this book, but is it in this chapter, or is it later on, or is it in the original and not in the summary? Okay, I'll mention it now anyway. Okay. If it comes in the book later, then alhamdulillah, if not, no problem. Ibn Uthaymin rahimahullah, he says, قرأنا كثيرا وحفظنا قليلا. We read a lot and we memorized a little. قرأنا كثيرا وحفظنا قليلا. We read a lot and we memorized a little. And we benefited more from what we memorized than that which we read. We benefited more from that which we memorized from that which we read. SubhanAllah, ponder over that statement. We read a lot and memorized a little. And we benefited more from what we memorized than what we read. You think he read a lot. Likewise, when you read something, I've read many books, many of them, I'll be honest, I've forgotten a lot of what I read. Right? But what I've memorized, alhamdulillah, I've been over it again and again and again and again. Right? So that's why showing the importance of memorization being accompanied with understanding. For knowledge generally needs three things: memorization, understanding, and action. These three things have to be there. Right? Because you memorize, it's with you. Then you understand what you've memorized. And then the objective is what? Is to act upon. And that's why, what's the famous statement of Abu Rahman al-Sulami rahimahullah regarding the Sahaba? What did he say? Who knows? I mentioned this 2 or 3 times. Good. The Sahaba would memorize 10 ayat, understand those 10 ayat, and then act upon those 10 ayat, and only after that they will move on to the next 10 ayat. So in fact, I think that'll be the best answer to your question. It's mentioned in this narration. What did the Sahaba do? They memorized 10 ayat. Then they understood. So they had memorization, then they had understanding. And then they acted upon those 10 ayat. They had action. And then they moved on to the next. And that's what Abdul Rahman Sulmi at the end of the narration he says, فَتَعَلَّمْنَا الْعِلْمَ وَالْعَمَلَ جَمِيعًا. We learn knowledge and action together. Right, the second thing he says is, as for the second affair, taking it upon a beneficial and sincere teacher. Okay, so the next point is that you have to have a teacher. So you go to the teacher that will make you understand its meaning and who is distinguished with the following 2 descriptions. So the second point is that you have to have a teacher. However, this teacher has to have 2 characteristics. So it's not any teacher, any person who claims to be teaching a book. It has to be a teacher who has the following 2 descriptions. Firstly, beneficial, meaning that he is qualified in knowledge. So the first one means that he is qualified, somebody who has reached that level, somebody who is well grounded in his knowledge, somebody who has, as the Prophet said, إِنَّمَا الْعِلْمُ بِالتَّعَلُّمِ, that the knowledge is through ta'allum. Ta'allum meaning he's gone out, he's traveled, he's sat with the scholars, he's memorized, he's revised, he's been tested. The ulama have allowed him to teach and so on. Okay? So he is from those that are known to have studied knowledge and sought it up until he had acquired it, and then he gained a strong command in it. And the origin of this is what has been narrated by Abu Dawood in the Sunnah with a strong chain of narration to Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma, that the Prophet said, تَسْمَعُونَ وَيُسْمَعُ مِنْكُمْ وَيُسْمَعُ مِمَّنْ سَمِعَ مِنْكُمْ. You will hear and it will be heard from you, and it will be heard from those that hear from you. So the Prophet says, what did he say to his companions? You're hearing from me. Then people will hear it from you, and then people will hear it from those that heard it from you. Right? That's how knowledge is passed. We have to go out, learn directly from a teacher. Who's taking it from his teacher? Taking it from his teacher, the whole chain of narration. Okay? And that which is significant, the author says, that which is significant here is a general address, not the one who is being addressed specifically. That's the principle the Shaykh is referring to, a principle. Al-ibratu bi'umum al-lafz la bi khusus sabab. That the point, the benefit that we take from the hadith is a generality of the wording and of the specific situation. Meaning, even though the Prophet is speaking to the Sahaba, right, speaking to Sahaba that you are going to hear, and the people are going to hear for you, i.e. the Tabi'een, and people are going to hear from them, Atba' Tabi'een, the hadith is not restricted to them. It's not restricted to who is being talked about. The general meaning it still applies now. That we have teachers and we have to hear it from them. And inshallah, if we get to that level, then people are going to hear it from us. Yeah, does that make sense what that paragraph means? Yeah? Okay. He says, so it ceases to be the case that from the signposts of knowledge in this nation is that the latter takes from his predecessor. That's the sunnah of this religion in terms of knowledge. The later people take it from those who came before them. As for the second description of the teacher. Right? First description was him being beneficial, i.e. qualified. Ilm, he has to have the ilm. The second description is that he has to be sincere. He has to be sincere. What does it mean to be sincere? The meaning of the Shaykh mentioned two things what it means to be sincere. I know it's going to get a bit confusing, everything's split into two things, right? Split into two more. I'll summarize it in the end in an easy way, inshallah. But what does it mean to be sincere? He mentions two things. He says, firstly, that the teacher is suitable to be an example and that you can follow his guidance, conduct, and his silence. What does that mean? Is that the first meaning is that of being sincere is that he is a suitable role model for you. And what does that mean? Mainly, his aqidah is sound. His aqidah is sound. But it's not limited to that. It's also that he's somebody that has good conduct, good mannerisms, good guidance, and so on. Right? So it's sometimes a question students may ask, this teacher, what's his aqidah? And depending on the answer they will take or they will not take from that person. As important as that question is, there's a part missing of that question, which is, how is he as a role model? Is he somebody that I should be benefiting from in terms of his conduct and in terms of the way that he conducts himself? That is just as important as his aqidah. So if you look at books like Al-Aqidah Al-Wasatiyah, has an aqidah in it. The ending of the book is all about mannerisms. Why? Because the mannerisms is part of a person, a Muslim's aqidah. And as we mentioned, when we talk about the importance of mannerisms, one of the hadith was, أكمل المؤمنين إيمانا أحسنهم خلقا. The most complete in iman is whom? The one who has the best manners. Right? And likewise, if you look at Imam Ahmad, for example, Ibn Muflih narrates in his book, Adab al-Shar'iyyah, he mentions regarding Imam Ahmad how 5,000 people used to attend Imam Ahmad's lessons. 5,000. Only 500 would be writing. And the remaining would all be benefiting from his mannerisms. So mannerisms is just as important as his aqidah. And both are, right? So both of these things should be looked into. That is the first meaning of being sincere. The second meaning of being sincere is, the author he says, he knows the different ways of teaching, to the point that he is proficient in teaching the student, and that he knows what is suitable for him and what harms him in accordance with the knowledge, cultivation that Ash-Shatibi mentioned in Al-Muwafaqat. So the second point is the teacher should know the different ways of teaching. Right? Because there's different ways of teaching. Sometimes a long explanation is needed, sometimes a short explanation is needed.
So what do you mean by silence?
Which one?
In point A.
And his silence, meaning somebody is that doesn't just speak all the time, rather it comes under his conduct. There is somebody that fully only either speaks good or remains silent. And nor does he speak regarding things that do not concern him. And he does not backbite people. And other things like that. It all comes under the good manners and conducts that we talked about. Yeah. So back to the second point, he knows the different ways of teaching. So for example, to beginners, he knows what to teach them. Right? He knows that, because him being a scholar has a lot of knowledge. Or him being a person of knowledge, he has a lot of knowledge. But he knows that I shouldn't be mentioning all of that right now, I should only mention a certain part to these students right now. Because that's what they need. And then later on, we can mention the other things. Right? So he knows what to mention to you. Or he knows how to teach you, meaning he doesn't sit here and maybe, and this differs from the time and place and where you are and the people that you are teaching. Maybe in certain areas, it's not befitting for a teacher to just sit here and just, be in a monotone voice to speak and speak and speak. The people, it'll go over their head or they'll feel bored or whatever. Maybe it requires, for example, if I was teaching 10-year-olds, I wouldn't teach them like this. Right? If I sat here every week, 1 hour, 1.5 hours, just speaking like this, They wouldn't be paying attention, right? Okay, so the way you would teach them is different. Likewise, if I was teaching, if I had lesson right now, and let's say all of the other asatiz over here, or colleagues from Medina and so on, right? The way I would probably be strict with you guys, I would be speaking to them in the same way. Why? Because they're different. Okay, so depending on who you're speaking to, depending on where you are, the time, the teacher needs to know the correct way and how to teach, and he needs to know how and what, or he needs to know how to give you what you need, and not just to give you what you want, or try to give you what you need, but in a manner which isn't befitting for you, right? And like we mentioned, if you look at Ibn Baz, rahimahullah, look at Shaykh al Usaymi, look at their lessons, very, very short, right? But it's what the people needed. They knew this is what they meant, they needed, they were sufficed with that. They weren't going to all the khilafah and all, that's not what people need. That's not what is most beneficial for them. So this principle regarding treading the path of knowledge is quite a long one. Okay? What I've done, I don't know if you can see here, right? I've just done a little tree diagram, which is summarizing for me. Okay? What is a correct path of seeking knowledge? Two things. Memorizing a method which is rajih, and having a teacher, right? What are the characteristics of the teacher? There are two. Again, that splits into two, right? First, he's qualified and he's sincere. Right? What does it mean to be sincere? I split it again into two, right? First is that he's a suitable role model, which includes his akhlaq, his mannerisms, conduct, and also his aqidah. And also you can add on to that as well is the genuine means of sincerity as well. Like, it's not somebody who is teaching just to get an agenda across. So some teachers might want to teach you certain things because they've got beef with another teacher, right? So they say certain things just because they got that person's agenda, right? Rather, he's teaching you because he's teaching you what you need. That's the first. And the second thing is that he knows how to teach, right? Who can give me that summary again? Well, I'll do it one more time. I'll do it one more time. Look at me, inshallah, so you understand, right? The correct way of knowledge is two things: memorizing a correct rajih text and having a teacher. What are the characteristics of a teacher? Qualified and sincere. What does it mean to be sincere? Two other things: suitable role model, and he knows how to teach. Okay, right? Who can repeat that back to me? I'll give you a minute to go over it. You can have a look. I'll give you a minute to go over it. Right, who's got that?
So it's qualified.
Sorry?
It's qualified.
From the beginning. Qualified teacher, that's later on. Right. The question is, according to this principle, what the Shaykh mentioned here, what is the correct way, the correct path of seeking knowledge? From the beginning.
From like the book.
From wherever the answer starts from. Firstly, what is the correct way of seeking knowledge? You can't just say yes, be qualified. What's before that? Right, somebody else. Go on, Mary.
Yes, so first, memorize the text which is logic,
First, memorize the text.
and find your teacher.
They have a teacher.
The teacher should have two characteristics.
Teacher should have two characteristics.
Beneficial and qualified
Beneficial, qualified. That's what you started from. So you started later on.
and sincere.
And sincere.
Means two things.
Just means two things.
Good role model
Role model
and also how to teach.
and also how to teach. Expand on good role model. What does that include?
Good conduct, good mannerisms,
Conduct, mannerisms.
and
Aqidah. And also, actually, add this on, add the third thing, which is that he's sincere in the sense that he gives you what you need, and not what you want. He gives you what you need. He gives you what you need. Not what you want, not for his own agenda, not for anything else. We make that third point. I think that's something very important.
So what's the first book?
So the first thing, okay. What is the path of seeking knowledge? Two answers. Two things. Memorizing a text, which is rajih. We explain the meaning of rajih. And the second is having a teacher. Okay. Now we want to go into the details of the teacher. The teacher has to have two characteristics. Right? That's what you mentioned. Qualified and sincere. And so what does sincere mean? The 2 points that you mentioned there. He's a role model and he knows how to teach. Right, somebody else put the hand up here. Was you? Yeah, go on.
Memorize beneficial text.
Memorize beneficial text.
And have the correct teacher.
Have a teacher.
The teacher has to have beneficial knowledge.
The teacher, don't say teacher has to have beneficial knowledge. Yeah, you can say that. What does that mean?
It means that the knowledge is sound.
I think a better way of wording it, he's qualified.
Qualified.
I'm qualified, okay. But still, yeah, the Sheikh did use the word benefit.
And he has sincerity.
Okay, sincerity, what does that mean?
Sincerity has two things.
I forgot that part. Who can complete it?
means to have good conduct and he needs to give you what you need.
He's a good role model, and that includes good conduct and gives you what you need, and sound aqidah. Second one?
He should give you what you need rather than what you
No,
want.
no. So he knows how to teach. He knows how to teach. Good. Yeah. Okay, inshallah, alhamdulillah, we finish with that principle. We'll start. I'll give you a 5-minute break, inshallah. 5 minutes, we'll continue. And obviously today's lesson is a bit longer, so we'll give you a 5-minute break. At 12 past on the dot, we're going to continue, inshallah. 12 past on the dot, we're going to continue, inshallah. Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Page 32, principle number 6. Giving attention to the different subjects in your search and giving precedence to the most important respectfully. This principle is mentioning 2 points. التقديم والتدرج. Prioritizing and leveling up. Prioritizing and leveling up. Meaning, we should study all of the sciences, however, you give precedence and you prioritize that which is most beneficial to you at that time, and you level up within those different sciences, starting with the basic books and then going higher and higher. Just as in life or in our education, you don't go to university straight away. You have GCSEs, then A levels, and then our bachelor's degrees, then masters and PhD, and so on. Likewise, in seeking knowledge, you start off with the beginning books, and then you move on to the intermediate, then to the advanced, and so on. And you prioritize that which is the most beneficial. And no. So that's what this chapter is talking about. So the author says, Ibn al-Jawzi rahimahullah said in Capturing Thoughts. What was the name of that book? Capturing Thoughts in Arabic. Anyone heard of this book? Capturing Thoughts. Yeah, famous book. Sayyid al-Khawatir. It's called in Arabic. It's a very good book. Anyways, he says in there, gathering different fields of knowledge is praiseworthy. من كل فن خذ ولا تجهل به فالحر مطلع على الأسرار. Take from every field and do not be ignorant of it, for the free is observant of the secrets. So he starts off by giving an introduction saying that all of the different sciences of Islam a person should study. Okay? A person should study all of them. And not just study one of them and not give any importance and not study any of the other sciences. And in these lines of poetry he says, من كل فن خذ ولا تجهل به. From every field, from every science, take and do not be ignorant of it. فالحر مطلع على الأسرار. For the free, the person who is free, he is the one who is observant of the secrets. You know, for example, if you have a picture, right? Let's say the picture of this book. All you could see is that part there. You might think, oh, khalas, it looks nice, the calligraphy is nice. Okay? And another person may only see that word over there. Another person might only see this design, which is over here, right? But the one who can see the whole thing, how is his understanding of what is in this page or in this picture? His understanding is much more complete and much more better than the ones who are just looking at something from a particular angle. And like that is Islam and its sciences. The one who restricts his sight to just looking at Islam from the lens of one science, then his understanding of Islam itself will be a lot deficient, deficient compared to the one who wears the full glasses where he can see the whole of Islam from all the different sciences and the different angles. And this is because if a person does not study all of the sciences and he focuses just on one, then he is not a specialist even in that science that he claims to be a specialist in. And why is that? It's because all of the sciences of Islam are connected and intertwined. All of the sciences of Islam are connected and intertwined. How are they connected and intertwined? I'm going to mention to you 4 ways. It's a great fact that everyone should be writing down. 4 ways in how the different sciences are connected and intertwined and overlap with one another. The first is التداخل الاستمدادي. It overlaps or is intertwined or is connected from the angle of al-istimdad, where these sciences are derived from. Where these sciences are derived from. So how are they all connected? Because they have the same place where they are derived from. All of the Islamic sciences generally are derived from what? The Quran and the Sunnah. Right? And obviously, some sciences when you go into it will slightly differ. So, Usul al-Fiqh is taken from the Arabic language and so on. You know, I don't need to go into the details right now, but generally, all the sciences are taken from the same origin, the Quran and Sunnah. So they all come from the exact same place. So therefore, if a person just focuses on one, then he has not encompassed everything which has worked or explained what the origin of where he's taken that knowledge from. Yeah. The second is at-tahsili, in terms of attainment. In terms of attainment. Meaning you cannot attain knowledge of one science properly, fully, unless you have knowledge of the other sciences also. So, and the clearest thing which explains this, if you look into the books of Usul al-Fiqh and so on, they mention how does a person become a faqih. And they call this the shurut al-faqih, the conditions that make him a faqih. And in there they mention that he needs to know Arabic, he needs to know Usul al-Fiqh, he needs to have knowledge of hadith, and so on. So now in fiqh, a person cannot be a specialist in fiqh if he doesn't know hadith, if he doesn't know the Arabic language, and so on. Right? So you cannot attain knowledge of that science without knowing the other sciences. Likewise, in tafsir, they have shurut al-mufassir. What are the conditions that allow a person to be at that level and be qualified to tafsir himself of the Quran? he has to have a number of conditions. And from them, I'll read one statement. There's one statement of Al-Allama Al-Muallimi, Abdurrahman Al-Muallimi Al-Yamani. He has a statement, right, which I'll read and try to summarize, inshallah. He says, لا ينبغي للعاقل أن يزج بنفسه في بحر الاستدلال حتى يجمع أموره. It is not befitting for a person with intellect to enter himself into the sea of istidlal. Istidlal means deduced rulings based upon the dalil, until he gathers a number of points. Now this statement of his, I'm going to say it quickly because it's really long. I'm going to say it quickly and to summarize. If anyone wants to write it out, then you can listen to the recording, inshallah. He says, الأول إتقان العربية وطول ممارستها. The first condition for him to be at the level where he can derive ruling himself is to perfect the Arabic language and to practice it for a long period of time. To perfect the Arabic language and to practice it for a long period of time. Then he has a long paragraph, and in there basically he gives an example. He says that a person with the Arabic language needs to be at that level where he doesn't need to even think about it. His Arabic is that strong. And he gives a bit of a funny example, right? He says, if you have two people, one is Japanese and one is Chinese, right? Would you be able to differentiate them? Right? Maybe not. Or if so, very difficult. However, if you were to ask a Japanese person or a Chinese person, right, which one's which, they'll answer you straight away. They'll answer you straight away, right? Why? Why are they able to answer straight away? We're not able to answer straight away? Because they live with them. That's his people, right? So because he knows how they look like, and if you ask him why, he may not be able to necessarily give you an answer because of this, because of that. He might not be able to. He just knows. Likewise, the Arabic language. Like you have to get to that level where if you hear a mistake, you know it's a mistake without even thinking about it. Just like English, you speak English now, right? If I was to make a mistake in a sentence, you say, no, that sounds wrong. Why? You probably won't be able to give the grammatical ruling behind it, right? But we know it's wrong. So he's saying that the Arabic language, your level should be at that level where that is called itqan, that you perfected it. Point number 2, he says al-ma'rifatu bil-ma'ani wal-bayan, knowing the eloquent meanings of the Arabic language and knowing the Arab poetry and how to apply its rulings and so on. So the second one is slightly different to the first, right? It's a bit of a higher level, I would say, in the sense that you know the poetry as well, you know the science behind it, you know, like for example now we know English, right? So we can say maybe in simple sense we've got the first point, but we don't have the second point in English. We'd have to do a degree in English literature or something like that, right? That's what the second point is talking about. The third is you have to know usul al-fiqh and be able to use usul al-fiqh without doing taqlid, but rather by applying the rulings yourself and having a lot of practice in them. The fourth, he says, is knowing mustalah al-hadith and knowing the different levels of the people, the narrators and so on. The fifth, he says, is reading a lot of the books of hadith and knowing the understanding, the meanings of all those ahadith, and knowing which ahadith are authentic and which ahadith are not authentic, and having practice when it comes to the hidden defects and the ilal of the hadith, and being able to mention which ahadith are stronger than others, and that also includes knowing the seerah of the Prophet in depth, and knowing how the Arabs were before the Prophet was sent, and so on, and knowing the lives of the Sahaba and their opinions, and the Tabi'in and their opinions. The sixth, knowing the different levels of the scholars, other than the Prophet and other than the Sahaba, knowing their different levels, knowing which ones took to the Sunnah more, knowing which ones are the people of innovation, and so on. The seventh point, he says, وَهُوَ الْأَوَّلُ فِي رُتْبَةٍ وَالْأَوْلَى بِالْعِنَايَةِ, which is should be the first point, which is the most important, is pondering over the Quran a lot and knowing the meaning of the Quran and constantly testing yourself in terms of the meanings of the Quran and so on. And number 8, he mentions all the spiritual aspect of it. He says ikhlas and having sincerity, loving the truth, not following your desires, preserving your prayers, and so on. It's a long statement. I've literally summarized it for you. It's like 2 full pages I've summarized it for you. The point I'm trying to make here is he's saying if you want to be able to deduce a ruling, which in this case mostly is referring to, I would say, fiqh. How many things did he mention? He mentioned 8 different things. Are they all the things from one science, or are they from different sciences? From different sciences. One's about Arabic, one's about usul fiqh, one's Mustalah Hadith, one's Hadith, one's Quran, right? So you cannot be a specialist in fiqh if you don't know the other sciences. The third way in how the different sciences are connected is al-mawdu'i, in terms of their topics. In terms of the topics. What do we mean by topics? We mean two things by the topics. That, or the general meaning of topics, before the 2 points, is that one topic can be studied in more than one science. Actually, no, make that the first one. Make that the first point. Make that the first one. The first, what we mean by topics is that one topic can be studied in more than one science. And some sciences might specialize more in that topic than the other science. And the second thing that we mean is that each science may study that same issue but from different angles. That same issue might be studied from different angles depending on different sciences. So what are the two things? The first is that one issue is studied in more than one science, and one science may specialize more than the other. And the second is that each science will look at that issue in different ways. I'll give you an example, right? The Basmala, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In Arabic language, they look at Bismillah, Ba'at, Harf, Jar, it means Ism Majroor, so you have a Kasratiyan, and it's also Madaf, Lafz Jar, Majroor as well, you have a Kasra. I talk about the grammar side of it. The Balagha side will talk about the hidden meanings of it, which is Abda'u, Bismillah, Asta'inu, and so on, the hidden meaning. Then you'll have the scholars of Qira'at saying, is it an ayah, is it not an ayah, what different ways that we can say the Basmala, and so on. And then you have the scholars of fiqh, right, who will say, okay, depending on what the Qira'at, the scholars there, what they say, okay, if it is an ayah, then we have to recite Bismillah in Salah, do we not recite it? If we do recite it, do we recite it quietly or do we recite it out loud? And so on. One issue. But look at everything, it's studied in more than one science, and each science is looking at it from a different perspective. The fourth way is at-ta'athuri, the effect of the sciences. What do we mean by the effects of the sciences? We mean that the sciences themselves have an effect on one another. So for example, the science of Aqidah has effects on especially Usul al-Fiqh and Arabic language. Why is that? It's because, for example, some people of innovation, they had certain beliefs. So because of their beliefs, some of their scholars would place certain grammatical rulings, and they'll say the rule is this, just so they can apply that ruling upon the text so that it falsely proves what they believe in. Right? So you can see, because the Aqidah, right, is affected the books of grammar. Likewise Hadith. For example, we took this in the Hadith Dora, right? We have some of the people of innovation, they do not accept Khabar Ahad. They do not accept singular narrations. Why is that? It goes back to their Aqidah. Why? Because they got to that stage where their beliefs were so innovated that they were going against clear-cut ahadith. So they couldn't answer those hadiths. So guess what they said? The Khabar Ahad, because most of the hadiths are Khabar Ahad, singular narrations, they said, because Aqidah, we have to have certainty. If it's a singular narration, maybe we made a mistake, we don't have certainty, right? We're not acting from Khabar Ahad. That was a way for them just to get rid of all the hadith. So look how hadith and Aqidah here is connected. So these are four ways in how all the sciences are connected. Firstly, in terms of where they originate from. And secondly, in terms of attainment, that you can't understand one science properly without understanding the other sciences. Thirdly, the topics within these sciences, these issues and topics are studied in different sciences and they are looked at in different angles. And lastly, the effect that each science has on the other sciences. With that, you can see the importance of learning all of the sciences in Islam. We continue, and the Shaykh, he says, the Shaykh of our teachers, Muhammad ibn Mani', he says in Irshad al-Tullab, Irshad al-Tullab is a very important book, regarding the etiquettes and mannerisms of seeking knowledge. In the beginning, I mentioned to you 3 books, right? Plus, you make this a 4th book in terms of seeking knowledge. It's a very important book. He says it is not befitting for the virtuous, person of virtue, person who wants to attain high levels, to leave off a subject from the beneficial subjects of knowledge that helps in the understanding of the book and the sunnah if he knows that he has a capability to learn it. So he's mentioning here 2 advices. The first advice is focusing on all of the sciences. But he puts a condition there, if you're able to do so. If you're not able to focus on all of them, focus on one at a time. So still learn all of them, but focus on the most important, which we're going to get to in a second. Then the second thing he says, likewise, it is not permissible for him to speak badly about the knowledge he is ignorant of, nor to belittle the one who is knowledgeable of it. For indeed, this is deficiency and despicable. Meaning, if you, let's use specialize in Aqidah, it's not permissible for you to look down upon the other subjects. And a lot of times this will happen. Why? Because people are ignorant of the importance of the other subjects. So for example, a person of fiqh might say, why are you busy yourself with hadith? Learning all these chains of knowledge. The main thing is acting upon the hadith. Why are you busy yourself with people in Bukhari and Muslim is enough, that's it, act upon it. Right? So a person of fiqh might say that. And a person of hadith, he'll say the opposite. He'll say, the religion is built upon the Quran and Sunnah. But then he'll just be memorizing, he won't be focusing on actual action, and then he'll use that to attack the others. That's not permissible. Rather, all of the sciences in Islam have their position, have their place, and they have to be, all of them have to be studied. And then the Shaykh, he says, so it's upon the intellectual to speak with knowledge or to be silent with forbearance. Meaning, when you speak, either speak with knowledge or remain silent with forbearance, right? And that's when it's praiseworthy. When is speech praiseworthy? When you speak with knowledge and wisdom. And is this praiseworthy? When you speak with ignorance. And when is silence praiseworthy? When you speak with hilm, forbearance, meaning you're able to speak, but due to the benefit or due to the harms, you remain silent. And when is silence dispraised? When it is done out of weakness, in the sense that you could have said something you could have said something for it to be the means of the truth being widespread, but due to you being shy, for example, you didn't speak. Now that's a deficiency. That's when you don't stay quiet. Okay. Otherwise, the asl is that your person shouldn't speak. As Prophet said, فَلْيَقُلْ خَيْرًا أَوْ لِيَصْمُتْ. Either speak good or remain silent. If it's good, speak. If it's not good, or if you don't know, then remain silent. And he says, otherwise he will come underneath the saying, أَتَانِي أَنَّ سَهْلًا ذَمَّ جَهْلًا عُلُومًا لَيْسَ يَعْرِفُهُنَّ سَهْلٌ عُلُومًا لَوْ قَرَاهَا مَا قَلَاهَا وَلَكِنَّ الرِّضَى بِالْجَهْلِ سَهْلٌ. It has reached me that Sahal ignorantly dispraised sciences that Sahal had no clue of. Sciences, had he known, he wouldn't have disliked, but in any case, being pleased with ignorance is Sahal, it's easy. So you can see the play on words here. The person, his name was Sahal, but the word Sahal in Arabic also means easy. Right? The Shaykh says, the last line, وَلَكِنَّ الرِّضَى بِالْجَهْلِ سَهْلٌ. Being content with ignorance, that's easy. It's easy for you to say, we don't need that science, we don't need that science, we just need okay, it's easy. Right? To be ignorant of what is important. Actually going and learning, that's more difficult. End quote. Now the Shaykh, he gets to the actual point of this principle, and he says, giving attention to different subjects only becomes beneficial by adhering to 2 principles. Firstly, by giving precedence to that which is most important, then most important from those things that the student needs to uphold, his servitude to Allah. What this means is that we've set the foundation, which is that we have to study all of the sciences. However, that is only beneficial if you do a number of things. The first is you have to prioritize. You have to give precedence to the most important, and then to the most important after that. If you are able to do more than one, this goes back to the ability of the person. And how does the person know if he's able or not? He asks his teacher, but the teacher will know the level of the student, he will know the level of the books that he wants to study, and the teacher will guide him. Should he do one subject or should he do 2, and depending on the time after the student explains the situation. Right? But the asl is that you focus on one thing at a time. And doing more depends on a person's level. And this is why Imam Malik, rahimahullah, he was asked regarding seeking knowledge, and he said, حَسَنٌ جَمِيلٌ, something beautiful and good. وَلَكِنْ أُنظُرْ الَّذِي يَلْزَمُكَ مِنْ حِينِ تُصْبِحْ إِلَى حِينِ تُمْسِي فَالْزَمْ. But look at what you need from the time you wake up until the time you sleep, or the time that you reach the morning until the time that you pass away, until the time you sleep. فَالْزَمْهُ, and stick to that, i.e. learn that. So Imam Malik is saying, prioritize. Seeking knowledge is very good, but firstly learn what you need on a day-to-day basis. How to pray, zakah, fasting comes every single year, your day-to-day businesses. Prioritize knowledge of these things first, because that's what you need. Okay, that's what the Shaykh he says here. By giving precedence to that which is most important, then the most important, from those things that the student needs to uphold his servitude to Allah. Because that's the objective, to act upon it and get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's from ignorance that a person, he goes out to study usul al-fiqh and qawaid fiqhiyya and nahu and Arabic, but he doesn't know the basics of his religion, doesn't know about the 5 pillars of Islam, pillars of Iman, his aqidah, and so on. The second point is that his intent at the beginning of his studies is to cover a summarized book in every field, up until he completes the different beneficial subjects. Then he looks at that which suits him, in which he finds ease, comfort, and ability. And then he masters that, whether it is one subject or more than one. So here the Shaykh now says, after you've prioritized and you've studied all of the subjects, now you can move on to specializing in a certain subject. So the first thing that a person should do, us in our beginning levels, study all of the sciences, right? Fiqh, aqidah, hadith, mustalah, usul al-fiqh, qawaid fiqhiyya, all of these different sciences. Once you've studied all of them and you've got a solid foundation in all of them, then there's no harm in you specializing or going further in one of them or in 2 of them, and that goes back to your level and or to your ability. And that's what they say. They say, خذ من الشيء خذ من شيء الشيء وخذ من الشيء الكل. Take from something and take from something everything. Meaning, from every science take something, and then one science specialize in it and take everything. So I think they say خذ من الكل شيء ومن الشيء الكل. So take from everything something, specialize, learn every single subject, and then after that you can specialize in one subject. And when we talk about prioritizing, it's prioritizing in the sciences, so focus on that science which you need the most. In the books itself, don't go to the bigger books for the smaller books. And even in the issues, there are some issues that you don't need to go into too much detail right now, that detail can come later on. I will quickly finish this off. From the amazing speech of the Mauritanians is that one of them said, وَإِن تُرِدْ تَحْصِيلَ فَنٍ تَتَمِّمَهُ وَعَنْ سِوَاهُ قَبْلٍ تَهِيمَهُ وَفِي تُرَادِفِ الْعُلُومِ الْمَنْعُجَاءِ إِنْ تَوْأَمَانِ اسْتَبَقَا لَنْ يَخْرُجَا. If you want to acquire a field, then go all the way, and until you have finished from the other, then stay away. And combining multiple subjects have been made illicit, like twins racing out the womb, none would exist. Can 2 babies come out at the exact same time? They can't. One come out and the other. Likewise, this line of poetry is focus on one, don't do 2 at the same time. And the only time you should be able to do 2 is if you are able to properly focus on all of them. And in the last paragraph he says, as for the one who finds within himself the strength to combine, then he combines. And his situation is an exception from the general rule, as we mentioned. And with that, alhamdulillah, we finished the 6th principle. Make sure you guys revise and test you on all 6, inshallah, next week. And we'll continue from principle number 7. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك اشهد ان لا اله الا انت استغفرك واتوب اليك.